Prime Minister, you've said Israel will not allow Iran to get nuclear weapons. How do you propose to stop them?
In any way that's necessary.
Most of the world thinks the deal was the best way of stopping them. You're not a supporter of the deal. All roads lead to military action, don't they?
Not at all. They lead to pressure. Pressure can be of various kinds. And I've seen in the past that when Iran faced very strong pressure, yes, a credible military response too, but also by primarily paralyzing sanctions, they came to the
You're not going to get the world behind sanctions.
It's already happened, Evan. I didn't come here, contrary to news reports on another network, that I'm going to try to persuade the E3, the Europeans, to leave the deal. That wasn't my discussion. I said the deal is dead. It's done. Because of the force of the economic sanctions
that the
of the United States.
The American sanctions will have a huge effect, but you're not going to get the real tough sanctions by the whole world, the Chinese, the Russians. You're not going to get the world behind that because they supported the deal.
You're an economist. The force of markets, of a $21 trillion economy that says to Chinese companies, European companies, companies anywhere in the world, I don't specify a country, you have to choose. Choose between the Iranian economy, which is about 3 or 4% of the American economy.
No, companies will choose the Americans, obviously. My contention is that the sanctions are not going to be tough enough.
Oh, they're not going to work.
There isn't going to be. There isn't going to be another deal, and in the end, you will have to use military force to comply with your statement.
Well, Iran will have to choose. Iran will have to choose. Look, I think there's a larger issue here. All the diplomats and all the politicians and leaders talk in terms of sanctions and in terms of this little item or that big item. I want to look at the very big picture. Here's a tyrannical, aggressive regime that is trying to conquer the Middle East, has a demented view of somehow converting all Muslims in the world to Shiism under the strength of Iranian tyranny. And this has to be stopped.
But let's not argue about the objective. We know what you think the objective
pretty
is,
good
and
objective.
a lot of people agree with you on the objective. The question is how you stop it. And the truth is, military action to take out their nuclear installations doesn't solve it, because you can take out installations with military action, but you can't take out the know-how. And too many people in Iran know how to do it to prevent it.
Well, I think the production of nuclear weapons is actually a little more complicated than that. You need people, you need installations, you need accumulated experience, and you need very precise engineering. That's very hard to do. It's not an easy thing. It's not going on the internet. And I think we have stopped, by our combined efforts, political, economic, and other efforts, we have stopped Iran from achieving nuclear weapons. If we hadn't done it, I can guarantee you, Evan, they would have had a nuclear arsenal long ago. So actually, we've been quite successful. And in any case, we should just not accommodate this aggressive, tyrannical regime that is, instead of joining the community of nations, is devouring the nations after the Iran deal. The Iran deal was supposed to moderate Iran's ambitions. It actually fueled their aggression by giving them billions of dollars.
Let's move on and talk about events in Israel, around Israel, and in the Middle East. May the 14th was a really interesting day for your country. It was the day the American embassy in Jerusalem opened, and a lot of us were watching literally television news programs, split screens, of the celebrations you were having and attending over that, and at the same time shooting at protesters on the Gaza border. How many died that day?
62, 50 of which were Hamas terrorist fighters, according to the Hamas's own admissions.
A dozen civilians.
But they weren't
died.
protesters. They weren't protesters.
A dozen civilians. You called it a glorious day. Do you still think that was a glorious day?
I think it's a historic day.
Do you think it was a glorious day?
For the moving of the embassy to Jerusalem? Of course it was. It was great.
You don't seem to show much concern for the dozen or so.
Well, you don't
civilian deaths.
You don't seem to allow me to answer your questions.
Go ahead.
Let me answer your questions, then you'll decide if what I'm saying makes sense or not. Yes, I think that recognizing the fact that Jerusalem has been Israel's capital since 3,000 years ago, the time of King David, is a great day. Moving the American embassy there is a great thing. I think eventually everybody will move their embassies there. You'll see. It'll take time. But that's one good thing. The bad thing, which obviously none of us are happy about, is that Hamas is trying to storm into Israel, not peaceful protests. I don't care if they protest on their side. Who cares? That's not the point. But they say we're going to storm into Israel and kill as many Israelis as we can that are right next to the border fence. They're about 200 meters away in kibbutzim. We want to stop them. We tried non-lethal means. We tried water cannon. We tried tear gas.
You've made this
Doesn't work.
point many times,
Yeah,
and I
making it
still
again.
wonder whether you would use the phrase "it's a glorious day."
On the movement of the embassy, for sure.
Well, I mean,
Look,
both things were happening. Both things were related, weren't they? It
well,
was
I
the moving
can
of the
tell you,
embassy that
it
caused
was
the protests
glorious.
in Gaza.
It was glorious in Jerusalem, and it was regrettable in Gaza that Hamas...
Tragic,
that
absolutely tragic. Your troops
Well,
killed
it's
61...
tragic sounds like almost some force of nature. It wasn't a force of nature. It was a deliberate policy of Hamas to push people into the line of fire, to try to kill Israelis, and to present it as though this is Martin Luther King Day. It wasn't Martin Luther King. It wasn't Mother Teresa. These were not peaceful protests. This was violent riots directed at killing Israelis.
It underlines the need for a permanent solution to the issue around Palestine.
There's a very
land
simple
rights.
permanent solution.
Well, tell me what is on offer. What is on offer to the Palestinians if they do everything that you say in terms of recognition of the right of Israel to exist as a Jewish state?
Well, first of all, I think you hit the nail on the
Yeah.
head. That's the
What is
problem.
on offer for them?
If they do it, they'll have the ability to govern themselves, all the rights to govern themselves, and none of the powers to threaten us. And that's a good deal.
They get a state of their own?
You can call it what you want, but I
But
think
it isn't a state of their own, is
well, except for one thing. I mean, the main thing is that the security responsibility in an area that is the size of Greater London behind us, that's all Israel is. In that area, we would have the overriding security responsibility. You'll say, well, it's a state minus, it's an autonomy plus, I don't care how you call it. But I want them
With
to have
Jerusalem
all the
as a
powers to
capital,
govern
with
themselves
a capital in East Jerusalem.
and none of the powers to threaten.
And capital in East Jerusalem.
Their capital? Their capital will be where they choose it, but it will be Jerusalem was and will remain our capital. It has been for many,
But East Jerusalem
for
can be
many
their-
millennia.
Sorry, I just want to be clear. East Jerusalem can be their capital if you say they can choose their capital.
No, I said that Jerusalem will remain Israel's capital. So on this, we
So
obviously
in
have a
terms
difference of views.
So
here.
just because I think the really important thing is who is the obstacle to peace, and in terms of how the world sees the division of terrain, your position is your security is paramount, legitimate. Your security cannot be achieved without occupying their land. And
Occupying
anyway,
them. I
by
don't
the
know.
way, they can't even have all their land because you're taking some of it. Is that, am I
Well, who says, first of
summarising
all,
it
who
fair?
says it's their land? We've only been there
Well, that's
3,000
the
years.
international.
Yeah, but I'm a son of a historian. I don't buy current fads. I mean, I
You
look
don't
at
buy
longer term.
international law, international
Current
recognition.
fads. I think there's been an obstruction of
Israel benefits from a
international-
world order, does it not? Israel benefits from
You've just asked
stability.
me 5 questions, Evan. You're very good at firing them. You're not good at listening to my response. So here's my response. Look, the fact is that history has ordained that both Jews and Palestinians are living in the same tiny land, which is really the width, as I said, of Greater London. We have tried to leave territories, and immediately the radical Islamists came into them and fired thousands of rockets into our territory. So when I talk about security, I'm not talking about a theoretical question. I don't want that to happen again. We left Gaza, gave it to the Palestinians. They fired 5,000 rockets into Israel.
Okay.
So security is paramount, but I think there is also justice. Justice maintains that the one and only Jewish state would have the ability to live and be recognized. The reason we don't solve this problem is not because there's no Palestinian state. It's because the Palestinians refuse to recognize the Jewish state. If they recognize it, then I think we can organize for them
Your
an
security is
independent
never
life,
going to. Your
an
security.
independent life with our security
The
guarantee.
American General John Allen organized a security plan for Israel. It wasn't dependent on what the Palestinians say. It was dependent on American troops in the Palestinian territory, so they can have their country and you can have your security. And you rejected that, not the Palestinian.
Well, they didn't even talk about it. They wouldn't come to the table. I said, look, I have, when you're talking about John Allen, it was a general who worked for Kerry. So they came up with a plan, okay? And President Obama, the boss of the Secretary of State and this general, invited me to the Oval Office And he said, Prime Minister Netanyahu, Bibi, what do you think? I said, look, I said, Barak, there are many things I don't like in this plan, but for the sake of peace, I'm willing to sit down and talk about it. Then he called the Palestinian leader, Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen. And he comes and he said to the Oval Office, and he said to him, look, Netanyahu says he doesn't like some of the things, but he's willing to sit down and negotiate the peace. What about you? And Abu Mazen said, well, let me think about it. And he went out and never came back.
John Allen's line is that politics got in the way, and I think...
Well, I didn't get in the way.
Let me ask you one last question.
I think there's a very simple test, you know. Do you want to sit down and negotiate peace? Abu Mazen now says that he will not consider anything any peace plan that the Americans bring because he accuses the current administration of being pro-Israeli. Did I say to Obama, I will not discuss your peace plan because you're pro-Palestinian? Of course not. If you want peace, sit down for God's sake and negotiate peace. And for God's sake, recognize the Jewish state.
Let me just ask, we're out of our allotted time. Let me ask you one last question.
I'll give you a little more time.
I'd like to ask you a question about empathy. Because it's whether you see any justice in the Palestinian case. You know, the 700,000 Palestinians who, for whatever reason, felt a need to leave when the state of Israel was created after the Second World War.
I think there were two refugee problems that were created, and they were tragic on both sides. One, the Palestinians who left what is now Israel, and an equal, possibly a greater number of Jews who were kicked out of Arab lands after that same war. We absorbed them on a tiny speck of territory.
So you have empathy, you understand why there's grievance in your region.
I think
you can see it from the other point of view, because you often come across as not understanding or listening to the other side.
How I'm described is always interesting, you know. This heavy-handed, person without feelings. Of course I have feelings, and I can understand the other side. I can't accept one thing. I can make peace with a former enemy who wants peace. But somebody who says to me, like Al-Qaeda, I want to destroy you, well, then you can't make peace with them until they reconcile themselves to your very existence. But I'll tell you where I'm very hopeful, and this will surprise you, and possibly your audience. I'm very hopeful because there is a massive change that is taking place today in the relations between Arabs and Israelis. It's happening with the Arab countries. Most of the Arab governments now are coming close to Israel because one of the Iranian threat, which they understand as we do, as being something that would threaten their survival. Second, once that happened, they began to see the benefits of civilian technology. And they want a better life for their people. And they know that Israel is this fountainhead of innovation that can change and better their lives. So we are having this subterranean normalization. And I think that as we normalize relations with the Arab world, not necessarily to full-fledged peace treaties, that we have with Egypt and Jordan, but it'll take time to get with the others, that it will eventually also impact the 1% of the Arab world who are Palestinians. I say normalize relations with the 99%, you'll eventually get peace with the 1%, although I think we should do it in tandem. So in a way, I'm quite hopeful, I have to tell you. I would never believe in my lifetime that we would have the kind of friendly relations and cooperation between Israel and the Arab states. And here's the most promising thing. That's beginning to affect public opinion in some of the Arab countries. They begin to think of Israel differently. And I'll tell you something, this is what Israelis long for.
A lot of people think you are happy with the status quo and will just carry on as it is because it's okay for you because you've got your way.
I'm changing it, actually. I'm changing it because I'm deliberately pursuing this policy of cooperation with the Arab world, not only because it's good on its own merits, but also because, Evan, I believe it's a path to peace. I think there's a core of poisoned minds and hearts in the Palestinians that is very hard to dislodge after 70 years. You see that with some of our neighbors. You know, I've opened up a field hospital for Syrian wounded civilians, women, children, horrible things, burnt, lost limbs, and we take care of them on our side of the border. I visited them, and they say, we're in shock. been told all these years that you are the devils. And the first time we were humanely treated is by these doctors who are, by the way, both Jewish Israelis, Arab Israelis, and they saw the Prime Minister of Israel, and they were absolutely in shock. So I think that the fact that we have this newfound relationship with the Arab world, and they see what we're really like, that we really want a solution. We just want a solution that doesn't kill us, that we can live with, and they can live with. I think that's hope, real hope. It hasn't happened. 70 years of Israel's existence, which we celebrate today, never had this, and it's wonderful.
Prime Minister, thank you very much.
Thank you.